All right, what's going on, guys? It's Simple Sports back again. Another episode. I want to talk about something I touched on in my last episode, talking about KD and LeBron. Um, so just over the last, I don't know, I guess over the last year or so, uh, there's been a lot of hate towards KD, and just recently, there's been a lot more discussion about whether or not KD was a better player than LeBron, and has he surpassed him as the best player in the league, and things of that nature. And the crazy part to me, and the reason why I'm doing this episode, what blows my mind about the whole situation is how much disgust there is that's even a conversation amongst my peers and you see other fans and people on the internet and stuff like that. It's just really crazy to me that there's such a disgust from people who think that KD right now is a better player than LeBron James, and I just don't understand. I'm trying to wrap my head around it, but I just can't, because I look at it like this: like, as I've matured, like, I've grown to understand that people like what they like and they don't like what they don't like, and people like what they like at certain times, and eras matter and generations matter. The person and their makeup matters, and you can't fault them for that. And the perfect example is, I mean, just look at the NBA itself, and in that very question, just who's the best player in the league, or even better, who's the best player in NBA history, who's the greatest of all time. And it's always evolved. The answers always evolve. And it started with, I don't know, obviously I'm not from that era, but I would assume it was Bill Russell first. I don't know if there was someone before that, as far as someone being considered the greatest of all time. I don't know. That's as far back as my memory goes. Bill Russell. And then it progressed to players like, Oscar Robertsons and the Larry Birds and the Magic Johnsons. And then it got to Michael Jordan. And it was, and that's been sort of the agreed upon, like, he's been the best player in history. That's sort of a universal fact, right? Doesn't necessarily make it a fact, but most people, if you ask them, who's the best NBA player ever, is MJ. And then that answer has progressed. Now, for a while, the people thought it would be Kobe. They thought Kobe was the next to make the leap into first place. And although I don't think he's in first place, there's some people who definitely think he's, top 5, top 3 even. And, that's fair. If you want to put him there, that's fine. I think he's certainly in the top 10. I don't know if he's in the top 3, maybe top 5. But, I think, I don't know. I don't have my list. I've never made a list, but I guess off the top of my head, I'd say in the top 5, Kobe. But point being, he was sort of the last one that we thought would surpass MJ. And then LeBron came along, and now he's being discussed as the best ever. A lot of people think he's already the second best ever. And so my point is, I don't understand why it's such a disgrace to have KD be next in that conversation. You got to realize KD is in his prime. He's under 30 years old. He just won his first title. It's not like there's this huge gap between him and LeBron as far as talent. I mean, you can see their numbers, and I don't care about the stats normally, but you can look at their numbers just alone and see they have very comparable numbers, and they each have their own strengths and weaknesses just in terms of stats alone. But by and large, they're both dominant players. So the numbers don't necessarily scream, LeBron is so much greater than KD. Now, I think in terms of efficiency and over their career especially, I think LeBron is the better overall player, or at least had the higher peak. And that's sort of how I look at it when I determine who is sort of the greater player or the better player. I always look at circumstances. I'm not a huge stats guy. Like I always say, stats to me are supplemental. I look at the circumstances, I look at the tape, things like that, and I look at people's peaks when it comes to numbers, and not peaks as in outliers. Like, for example, Tom Brady. I don't judge Tom Brady on the '07 Randy Moss year. Like, that's not who he is every year. He had a great year, and it was elevated because he had an all-time great receiver, but you can't judge him on that year. But you get what I'm saying. Like, I look at when so-and-so was at their best, where do they rank to me amongst others in that same scenario? And I don't understand why KD is so, like, saying that he's a better player this year than LeBron James is such an offensive, like, hot take. I don't get it. And people bash him for going to Golden State. I look at it as work smarter, not harder. I don't know why. You can forget about the whole situation in OKC as far as Russ goes and all that stuff. Just look at it from this standpoint. He felt like he wanted to be in a different system that made him more comfortable, which helped him relax and do, what he wanted to do in terms of his career, which was win a title. And he wanted to do it playing a certain style. And he didn't feel like he can do that in OKC, so he went elsewhere. And he just so happened to go to the team that was in the finals last year that won 73 games. Who cares? They didn't win the title, first of all. Second of all, he made his job easier. Why would you want to make your job more difficult? That is the point of practice, working hard, putting in the effort, watching the film, things like that, is to make your job easier. So why limit yourself only to off the court? Why not, help make your job easier on the court as well? I don't understand as far as, him going to Golden State all of a sudden makes him this terrible, terrible player or something of that nature. But anyway, it's just remarkable to me, like I said, how much disgust there is for him this year, and especially to the question that he may be a better player than LeBron James. As I said, I don't see this ginormous gap that everyone else sees. I see, each of them go out each night, put on a great show. Each of them have bad games occasionally. Each of them have outstanding games occasionally. And for the most part, they're both great in their own right. LeBron happens to have more titles than than KD right now. Kobe to me I would still take Kobe over LeBron in terms of like their production and their accomplishments. He has more to me than LeBron James. And for me, it's about titles. Like, I want to say I finished first the most. That's what it's about to me. I finished first the most. And, I don't understand why that's such a bad thing. It just blows my mind. So I don't know. I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit more. I've been seeing it go around a lot lately, on the internet, and people like Nick Wright I get it. Like, you're a LeBron fan, that's great. Like, because I sort of grew up with LeBron as far as like my age and him being just a little bit older than me, so I was able to see him. Like, I spent a lot of my childhood watching LeBron and Kobe and all these other guys. So I have a healthy respect for him. I wasn't a fan of LeBron's at first, and I sort of changed my mind about who he is and all that stuff. And I don't understand why there's such a barrier between fans of certain players. You can be a fan of multiple people. It's okay. In the world we live in today, where there's fantasy sports and daily fantasy and betting and all this stuff, social media where you actually get to interact with players, it's like you don't have to have this hatred towards other teams and other players. I mean, it's cool if you do, like, whatever. But there's a difference between being competitive and being a hater. And I think a lot of it is people hating and just wanting to end the conversation and wanting to be right instead of actually listening to what other people have to say. I think KD this year is a better player than LeBron James. And I think going forward, that's going to be the case. And it's not because LeBron is not a great player. And that's what I think people don't understand. They take that statement as saying LeBron is not a great player, or Kobe wasn't a great player, or, whoever, as it progresses and someone else gets left out of the conversation or overlooked. It doesn't mean they're not a great player. It just means that at the moment, there's a different mentality. There's a different mindset amongst the fans as to who the greatest is. You have to look at generation. People are younger. They grew up watching LeBron. They didn't grow up watching Michael Jordan. They didn't grow up watching Magic or Larry Bird. They grew up watching LeBron and Kobe and Tim Duncan and Shaq and Allen Iverson and Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant and Carmelo Anthony and Chris Paul and James Harden. These are the guys that they consider the best players, and that's because that's what they know. And so, sure, LeBron is in a league of his own, maybe for career-wise, but I think his biggest benefit is longevity, not necessarily because he was so much better than everyone else. He was just so much better than everyone else for so long. And I think that's what people don't understand. He was so much better than everyone else for so long and so much more efficient than everyone else for so long and consistently that it adds up over time. But individually, if you look at each season, each game, and things of that nature, when he's up against great players, it's not as if there's this huge gap. And I'll tell you a perfect example. Kenny Smith said on Inside the NBA a couple of nights ago, you can lose a game by, I think he said 16, but let's just go with 20. I like even numbers. Nice even 5s, 10s, 0s, stuff like that, whatever. But let's say you lose a game by 20 points. If you just look at the totals, you lost by 20. That's a blowout. But you could lose each quarter by 5 points, say 2 possessions. And if each quarter, 2 possessions, you screw something up and you end up down 5 points each time, by the end you're down 20 and it looks like a blowout, but you're really not that far off. And that's I guess the best analogy I can compare it to. It's not as if LeBron James was so much better than Kobe or so much better than MJ or any of these other guys or KD, for the purpose of this conversation, that as much as it was, he was so great for so long. He's been outstanding for 15 years. Most guys take time to get to their peak a couple of years, 5, 6 years, and then they stay at their peak for 5 or 6 years, and then they regress. LeBron has, maybe with the exception of his rookie year, he has been great. I mean, not to say he wasn't great his rookie year, but I'm saying in terms of his peak, he wasn't at his peak in his rookie year. But numbers-wise, you can look back over his career, and he's not only been great his entire career, but he's gotten better. And he's lasted for 15 years, and it's probably going to last another 5 or 6. So that's what makes him so great, but it's not the overall. You can't just look at the overall, and that's why I think stats need to be supplemental, not the end-all, be-all, because it could be manipulated in that very way. So that's all I got to say. Lay off of KD. I don't know. It's crazy to me. I think work smarter, not harder. I don't know why there's such a outrage about the fact that someone thinks LeBron or that KD's better than LeBron. But hey, I guess it was similar with Kobe. I mean, if you'd asked people about that same scenario with Kobe 10 years ago, it would have been outrage. Well, there probably is still in some cases, but hey, whatever. But I'll leave it there. I'll see you guys in the next episode, and I promise I'll have another battery for the smoke alarm because I'm sure that's driving you nuts. Peace.